General Wan sat in his command bunker deep underground staring at reports that made no sense according to everything he knew about warfare. His forces had conquered the major human cities and established occupation zones across multiple continents. But somehow the humans were fighting harder now than they had during the initial invasion. The reports from his field commanders told the same. Impossible story human military units that had been completely destroyed were somehow reforming in the mountains and forests. Human weapons that had been captured and secured were mysteriously disappearing from Imperial supply depots. Human civilians who should have been grateful for Imperial protection were instead joining armed resistance groups. One had commanded ground forces on 30 different worlds and had never seen anything like human warfare. These creatures seemed to have no understanding of proper military defeat. When their armies were broken, they simply formed new armies. When their leaders were captured, they simply chose new leaders. When their weapons were destroyed, they simply made better weapons. Captain Su entered the bunker carrying a datapad filled with the latest intelligence reports. Her face showed the strain of weeks of continuous fighting against an enemy that refused to behave like defeated primitives should behave. The humans were turning the conquest into a nightmare that kept getting worse. Sir, we have a problem, Sue said as she activated the holographic display. The humans are using our own technology against us, but they are not simply copying our weapons, they are improving them. This plasma rifle was recovered from a human resistance fighter. One examined the weapon with growing amazement. It looked like an Imperial plasma rifle, but the human modifications had made it more efficient, more powerful, and more reliable. The energy cells lasted longer, the targeting system was more accurate, and the cooling system prevented overheating during rapid fire. How is this possible? Wan demanded. We destroyed their manufacturing facilities and captured their research centers. These humans should not have access to advanced materials or precision equipment, yet they are building weapons that are superior to our own standard issue equipment. Sue pulled up more images showing human workshops hidden in caves, forests, and abandoned buildings. The humans had somehow created a decentralized manufacturing network that could produce advanced technology using primitive tools and salvaged materials. They were turning scrap metal into armor, electronic waste into computers, and captured plasma into improved weapons. Sir, the humans have something we have never encountered before, Sue continued. They call it the internet, and it allows them to share knowledge instantly across their entire planet. When one group of humans learns something new, every other group knows about it within hours. They are treating this war like a massive learning experiment. One studied the tactical maps showing human resistance activity across the planet instead of the normal pattern of decreasing resistance over time. The human activity was actually increasing. Every day more humans joined the fight, and every day they became more effective at killing Imperial soldiers. The humans had turned their entire planet into a weapons laboratory. They were experimenting with new tactics, new technologies, and new strategies faster than Imperial forces could adapt. Every battle taught them something new, and they immediately shared that knowledge with resistance groups around the world. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be enjoying the challenge of fighting a superior enemy. Their propaganda broadcasts spoke of historical figures like Minho, who had defended mountain passes against overwhelming odds, and Yuna, who had led civilian evacuations through enemy territory. These humans told stories about ordinary people who had done extraordinary things when faced with impossible situations. Sir, we intercepted another human broadcast, Sue said as she activated the audio system. A human leader was speaking to resistance fighters somewhere in the mountains, and his words made Wan feel cold despite the warmth of the bunker. The human voice spoke with calm determination about fighting for something called freedom. He talked about never surrendering to tyranny and about making the invaders pay for every meter of ground they took. He promised that humanity would never stop fighting as long as a single human remained alive. One realized that the Empire was not fighting an army or even a government. They were fighting an entire species that had turned warfare into their primary skill. Over thousands of years of constant conflict, the humans had spent millennia fighting each other and had developed every possible method of combat, survival, and resistance. The intelligence reports showed that humans had fought wars in every environment on their planet. They had developed tactics for mountain warfare, forest warfare, desert warfare, urban warfare, and even underwater combat. They had created weapons for every possible situation and had learned to fight using everything from advanced technology to primitive tools. What should have been a simple occupation was becoming an endless guerrilla war. The humans disappeared into their wilderness areas and emerged to strike. Imperial patrols with devastating effectiveness, they sabotaged supply lines, destroyed communication equipment, and somehow always knew where Imperial forces were going to be, sir. We have lost contact with 3 more patrol units, Sue reported. The humans are using some kind of stealth technology that makes them invisible to our sensors. They appear to attack and then vanish before our reinforcements can respond. One looked at the casualty reports and felt a chill of fear. His forces were suffering losses every day, while the human resistance seemed to be growing stronger. The primitives were learning to fight like professionals, while his professional soldiers were learning to fear an enemy they could barely see. The worst part was that the humans were spreading their resistance techniques to other species. The Empire had received reports of rebellion on worlds that had been peaceful for decades. Human prisoners were somehow communicating with other species and teaching them about concepts like freedom, independence, and the right to resist oppression. General Juan realized that the Empire had made a terrible mistake. These humans were not just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something completely different, and they were turning the galaxy's most powerful military force into a group of frightened occupiers hiding in fortified bases. The ancient warning was proving to be accurate in every detail. The humans refused to surrender. They grew stronger when outnumbered, and they were teaching the entire galaxy new ways to fight tyranny. Juan understood that this war was far from over and that the outcome was no longer certain. Dr. Ray worked by candlelight in her underground laboratory 3 kilometers beneath the ruins of what used to be the city of Sol. The Imperial forces controlled the surface, but they had no idea about the vast network of tunnel shelters and hidden facilities that humans had built in just a few months of desperate preparation. Her laboratory was one of thousands scattered across the planet, connected by fiber optic cables that the aliens could not detect. The humans had learned to communicate through buried networks that bypassed Imperial surveillance systems. Every discovery made in one lab was immediately shared with every other research facility on Earth. We have completely reverse-engineered their plasma technology, Ray reported to the resistance leaders through her encrypted communication system. But more importantly, we have figured out how their ships work, and we have found ways to make their technology better. The alien ship that Captain J had managed to capture 3 weeks ago had become humanity's greatest treasure. The Imperial crew had been taken prisoner, and their vessel had been completely dismantled by human engineers, who worked around the clock to understand every component. Ray held up a device that looked like an Imperial plasma rifle, but was obviously different. The human modifications were elegant and practical, where the alien design was complex and wasteful. The energy efficiency was 30% better, the range was increased, and the reliability was improved through simpler components. The aliens build their technology to show off their advanced materials and sophisticated manufacturing, Ray explained to her team. But we build our technology to work under any conditions with whatever materials we can find. Our weapons may look primitive, but they are actually more practical. The Human Research Network had accomplished something impossible. They had not just copied alien technology, but had understood the principles behind it, and then improved on those principles using human engineering philosophy. The results were weapons and equipment that were often superior to the original Imperial designs. More importantly, the humans had figured out how to manufacture advanced components using primitive equipment. They had learned to create plasma containment fields, using salvaged electronics to forge advanced alloys and makeshift furnaces, and to build precision instruments using hand tools and scavenged materials. Jay entered the laboratory carrying another piece of alien equipment that his team had liberated from an Imperial supply convoy. The humans had become experts at guerrilla raids that captured enemy technology and supplies while avoiding direct confrontation with superior Imperial forces. Look what we found, Jay said as he placed the device on Rai's workbench. This appears to be some kind of neural interface that connects Imperial soldiers to their command network. If we can hack into this system, we might be able to disrupt their entire communication structure. Ray examined the device with excitement. Human computer experts had been working for months to break Imperial encryption systems, but the aliens used quantum entanglement and other advanced technologies that were difficult to understand. This neural interface might provide the key they needed within hours. The human research network had analyzed the captured device and distributed the technical specifications to resistance groups worldwide. The humans had developed something the Empire had never seen before, a completely decentralized research and development system that could solve problems faster than any centralized organization. The breakthrough came when human hackers managed to create a virus that could infect Imperial computer systems through their neural interfaces. The virus was elegant and simple. It did not try to destroy Imperial systems, but instead fed false information to alien commanders while copying their tactical plans and sending them to human resistance leaders. But the humans were not content with just defensive measures. They had begun developing weapons specifically designed to fight aliens. These weapons took advantage of Imperial weaknesses that human scientists had discovered through careful study of alien biology and technology. Human chemists had created compounds that interfered with alien breathing systems. Human physicists had developed electromagnetic weapons that disrupted alien neural implants. Human biologists had engineered bacteria that could break down alien armor materials without harming Earth life forms. Sir, we have a problem, one of Rye's assistants reported. The Imperials have discovered 3 of our research facilities and are moving to attack them. The aliens had finally realized that the human resistance was not just using captured weapons, but was actually developing new technology. This was the moment that would test everything the humans had built. Reactivated the emergency protocols that would evacuate the endangered facilities while preserving their research data. The human network had been designed to survive exactly this kind of attack. The beauty of the human system was that destroying individual facilities did not stop the research. Every important discovery was immediately backed up at dozens of other locations. Every critical researcher had trained multiple replacements. Every essential piece of equipment could be rebuilt using plans stored in the distributed database. Within 6 hours, the 3 attacked facilities had been evacuated and their research had been transferred to new locations. The Imperial forces arrived to find empty underground chambers with no trace of the advanced work that had been conducted there. More importantly, the evacuation had been used as an opportunity to plant surveillance devices in the captured facilities. Now the humans could monitor Imperial activities and learn about alien countermeasures. While the aliens thought they had struck a blow against human research capabilities, Ray smiled as she watched the reports flowing in from resistance groups around the world. Human fighters were using the new weapons with devastating effectiveness against Imperial patrols. The aliens were discovering that their technological advantage was disappearing as humans learned to fight them with weapons designed specifically for that purpose. The neural interface hack was proving especially effective. Imperial commanders were receiving false reports about human activities, while their tactical plans were being intercepted and distributed to resistance leaders. The aliens were becoming confused and disorganized as their command structure was compromised. Sir, we have intercepted Imperial communications, suggesting they are requesting reinforcements from their homeworlds. Jay's intelligence team reported the local Imperial commanders are admitting that they cannot control human resistance. With their current forces, this was exactly what the human leadership had been hoping for. The longer the war continued, the more time humans had to develop new technologies and tactics. The aliens were designed for quick, overwhelming victories, not prolonged campaigns against adaptive enemies. Ray returned to her work with renewed energy. The humans had proven they could match alien technology, and now they were beginning to surpass it. The species that had been dismissed as primitive was teaching the galaxy that intelligence, creativity, and determination were more powerful than advanced materials and sophisticated manufacturing. The resistance was no longer just about survival. It had become about liberation, not just for humanity, but for every species that had been conquered by the Empire. The humans were sharing their discoveries with other oppressed peoples and teaching them that freedom was possible if they were willing to fight for it. Commander Day felt the excitement in his chest as his landing ship broke through Earth's atmosphere. The blue sky around his vessel turned from black space to bright daylight, and he could see the human cities spread out below him like tiny toys. His ship was one of 20 massive transports carrying the first wave of Imperial soldiers to the surface. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. Show the humans the power of Imperial technology, demand their immediate surrender, and establish control zones around their major population centers. Day had done this same operation on 15 different worlds, and it always worked the same way. The primitive species would see the impossible ships descending from the sky and realize that resistance was pointless. His tactical officer Ben worked at the control panel, monitoring the approach. Everything looked perfect. The human military forces were scrambling their aircraft, but their primitive jets could not even reach the altitude where the Imperial ships were flying. The energy shields around each landing craft glowed like rainbow bubbles, protecting them from anything the humans might throw at them. Sir, we are receiving multiple communications from human military commanders, Ben reported. They are demanding that we turn around and leave their airspace immediately. They claim they will defend their world with all available force. Day laughed at the foolish bravery of these creatures. He had studied the intelligence reports about human weapons. Their most powerful explosives were chemical-based bombs that could barely scratch Imperial armor. Their fastest aircraft moved slower than Imperial cargo ships. Their largest armies had fewer soldiers than a single Imperial battle grouplet. Then try their best, Day replied as he watched the beautiful blue world growing larger beneath them. When they see that their weapons cannot even touch our shields, they will understand the futility of resistance. Then we can begin the integration process and welcome them into the Empire. That was when the first missile struck his ship. The impact was so violent that Day was thrown from his command chair and crashed into the wall behind him. Emergency alarms began screaming throughout the ship, and the lights flickered from the damage. bin was shouting reports about system failures, but Day could barely hear him over the noise. How is this possible? Day demanded as he pulled himself back to his feet. The energy shields should have stopped any primitive explosive. These humans use chemical rockets that move slower than our patrol craft. Sir, the missile was not chemical, Vin replied with fear in his voice. Our sensors show it was some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapon designed to disrupt our shield generators. The humans have technology we did not know they possessed. Before Day could respond, another missile struck the ship. This one was different, and instead of an explosion, it delivered a kinetic penetrator that punched through the hull like it was made of paper. The metal projectile moved so fast that their sensors could barely track it, and it caused massive damage to the ship's interior systems. The communication system crackled with reports from the other landing ships in his formation. Every vessel was taking heavy fire from weapons that should not have existed on this primitive world. The humans were using electromagnetic pulse bombs, kinetic kill vehicles, and something their computers identified as nuclear warheads. Nuclear weapons were banned throughout the galaxy because they were too dangerous and unpredictable. Most civilized species had abandoned them thousands of years ago when they developed safer energy weapons, but these humans were actually using atomic explosives in their atmosphere without any concern for the radiation or environmental damage. Sir, we have another problem, Ben said as he worked frantically at his damage controls. The humans are coordinating their attacks across the entire planet simultaneously. Our electronic warfare systems cannot jam their communications. They are using something called the Internet that connects every human device on their world. Day stared at the tactical display in amazement. The humans were not fighting like any species he had ever encountered. Instead of having a central command structure that could be captured or destroyed, they seemed to have millions of individual commanders all working together. The Internet allowed them to share information faster than Imperial forces could react every time his ships adapted to human tactics. The humans immediately changed their strategy. It was like fighting an enemy that could think with a million minds at the same time. Every human seemed to know what every other human was doing, and they coordinated their attacks with impossible precision. The landing that should have taken 2 hours stretched into an entire day of brutal combat. Day's ships finally managed to establish beachheads near several human cities, but the cost was enormous. Half of his landing craft were destroyed or damaged, and many of his soldiers were dead or wounded. When the Imperial forces finally reached the human cities, they found something that shocked them. The civilians were gone. The humans had somehow evacuated millions of people from their urban areas in just a few hours, leaving behind empty buildings and abandoned streets, but the cities were not really empty. The humans had turned every structure into a fortress. Every building contained hidden weapons and defensive positions. Every street corner had been prepared as a fighting position. The humans had not abandoned their cities, they had turned them into traps. They realized with growing horror that the humans had been planning for this invasion long before Imperial ships arrived in their system. They had studied the Empire's standard tactics and prepared countermeasures for every Imperial strategy. The humans knew exactly how the Empire conducted planetary invasions, because they had done their homework. Sniper fire erupted from windows and rooftops as Imperial soldiers moved through the empty streets. Human fighters emerged from underground tunnels and sewers to attack Imperial patrols with weapons that looked primitive but proved devastatingly effective. Against Imperial armor, the humans were not just resisting the invasion, they were learning from it. Every time Imperial forces used a new weapon or tactic, the humans quickly developed a counter-strategy. They captured Imperial equipment and somehow figured out how to use it within hours instead of the months. It should have taken most disturbing of all. The humans seemed to have no concept of honorable surrender. When their organized military units were destroyed, civilian volunteers picked up weapons and continued fighting. When their weapons were destroyed, they made new ones from whatever materials they could find. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from Admiral Kyung Bin. Reported. The Admiral wants a status report on our progress. Day looked at the tactical display showing his forces scattered across multiple human cities, engaged in brutal urban warfare with an enemy that refused to follow the normal rules of conquest. He thought about how to explain that the primitive humans had turned his overwhelming technological advantage into a bloody nightmare. Tell the Admiral that the humans are not like other species we have encountered. They said slowly, they do not fight like rational beings who understand when they are defeated. They fight like creatures who would rather die than surrender, and somehow they are winning. The transmission ended, and Day stared out at the burning human city where his soldiers were fighting house to house against an enemy that seemed to multiply instead of diminish. He was beginning to understand that the ancient warning had not been superstition after all. The Empire had awakened something terrible, and now they would have to face the consequences. Admiral Kyung stood in the middle of the great command center aboard his massive warship. The Golden Victory. His eyes moved across the huge holographic display that showed thousands of stars floating in the dark space before him. Each star represented a world that belonged to the Galactic Empire, and now they had found another one to add to their collection. The bridge was filled with the quiet sounds of his crew working at their stations. The soft blue light from the control panels made their faces look calm and confident. These aliens had purple skin and 4 arms, which made them very good at operating complex machinery. Their large black eyes could see things that humans could not, and their tall, thin bodies moved with grace through the ship corridors. Kyung was proud of what his people had built over the last 1,000 years. They had started as simple traders moving from planet to planet, but now they controlled over 300 worlds across the galaxy. Their technology was so advanced that most species joined the Empire willingly after seeing their incredible ships and weapons. Those who refused to join were quickly convinced by a show of force. His second in command, Hannah, approached him with a datapad in her lower left hand. She was younger than most officers, but had proven herself in many battles. Her voice was soft but urgent when she spoke to him about their latest discovery. Sir, we have completed our scans of the 3rd planet in this system. The inhabitants call it Earth, and themselves humans. Our long-range sensors show they are still very primitive in their development. They have only recently learned to leave their planet and have visited their moon just a few times. Kyung nodded as he studied the information on her datapad. The images showed a blue and green world with white clouds swirling around it. The cities glowed with artificial lights at night, showing that the humans had electricity, but their technology was thousands of years behind the Empire. Their weapons are mostly chemical-based, and they still fight wars with metal projectiles. Hannah continued, they have split themselves into many different nations and spend much of their time fighting each other over resources and territory. Our cultural analysis suggests they would welcome strong leadership from a superior civilization. This was exactly what Kyung wanted to hear. Another primitive world that could be easily added to the empire. The humans would provide workers for the imperial factories and soldiers for the imperial armies. Once they saw the benefits of joining a galactic civilization, they would thank the empire for finding them. But then Hana showed him something that made his good mood disappear. She held up an ancient data crystal that glowed with a faint red light. This artifact had been discovered in the ruins of a dead civilization many years ago. The Empire kept such things in their archives but rarely paid attention to the old warnings and stories. Admiral, there's something else you should know about this system. We found this crystal in our historical database. It contains a warning from the ancients about this region of space. The message is old and hard to translate, but our best scholars have worked on it for many cycles. Kyung took the crystal and placed it in the reader. The holographic display changed to show strange symbols that hurt his eyes to look at. The translation appeared beside the symbols in the common imperial language. The words made him frown with confusion and irritation. The message spoke of a species called humans in this exact star system. It warned that these creatures were dangerous in ways that could not be measured by their technology. The ancients wrote that humans refused to surrender even when faced with certain death. They described beings who became more dangerous when outnumbered and somehow grew stronger when their backs were against the wall. The warning told of a species that turned every defeat into a lesson and every loss into motivation for revenge. It spoke of creatures who could adapt to any situation and learn from any enemy. The ancients claimed that humans treated war like an art form and had spent their entire history perfecting the skills of conflict and survival. Most disturbing of all, the warning suggested that humans were unpredictable in their thinking. They did not follow the logical patterns that other species used when making decisions. Instead, they relied on something the ancients called emotion, which made them capable of impossible acts of courage and determination. Kyung finished reading the warning and handed the crystal back to Hana with a dismissive wave of his hand. These were clearly the superstitions of a dead civilization that had probably never even met the humans. The ancients were known for their strange beliefs and mysterious ways of thinking. Many of their warnings had proven to be nothing more than fear and imagination. Look at the evidence before us, Kyung said as he pointed to the display showing Earth. These humans are barely capable of reaching their own moon while we travel between the stars in days. Their most powerful weapons use chemical explosions while we wield the power of stars themselves. They fight each other with primitive metals while we have energy shields that can stop anything. Hana looked uncertain but nodded at his logic. The evidence did seem to support his conclusion. The human military forces were tiny compared to imperial fleets. Their largest ships could barely leave their atmosphere, while imperial vessels could destroy planets. The technology gap was so large that it seemed impossible for humans to pose any real threat. The other officers on the bridge had been listening to their conversation, and they all agreed with their admiral. The warnings from the ancients might have made sense thousands of years ago, when technology was more primitive, but now the Empire had weapons and defenses that could handle any threat. The humans would see imperial ships descending from the sky and immediately understand that resistance was hopeless. Kyung made his decision with the confidence of someone who had conquered dozens of worlds without serious opposition. He ordered his fleet to move toward Earth and begin the standard imperial procedure for adding new worlds to their territory. They would offer the humans a chance to join peacefully, and when the humans saw their superior technology, they would surely accept. The invasion fleet consisted of 50 warships, each one larger than the biggest human cities. The ships had energy weapons that could level mountains and shields that could deflect any attack. The crews were trained warriors who had fought across the galaxy and never met an enemy they could not defeat. As the fleet moved through space toward Earth, automated probes flew ahead to make first contact with the human governments. The probes broadcast messages in hundreds of languages offering friendship and the benefits of joining the galactic community. The messages explained that the Empire brought peace, prosperity, and protection to all member worlds. The response from Earth came back within hours. Transmitted on primitive radio waves that the Imperial computers easily decoded. The message was short and simple, and it made the entire bridge crew laugh with amusement. The humans had sent just one word in response to the generous Imperial offer. Nokyung shook his head at the foolishness of these primitive creatures. They were about to learn what happened to species who refused the generous offer of Imperial membership. The fleet accelerated toward Earth, confident that they would be adding another easy victory to their long list of conquests. The ancient warning was forgotten as the ships prepared for what they expected to be the shortest invasion in Imperial history. Admiral Kyung stared at the tactical display aboard his flagship with growing horror. 6 months ago, his invasion fleet had controlled the space around Earth with overwhelming superiority. Now human ships were rising from the planet's surface and engaging Imperial vessels in actual space combat. The human ships looked crude and primitive compared to the elegant curves and advanced materials of Imperial warships. But appearances were deceiving, as Kyung had learned through months of bitter experience. These human vessels incorporated both alien and human technology in ways that his engineers claimed were impossible. How are they building space-capable ships so quickly? Kyung demanded from his tactical officer Tae. The humans were supposed to be decades away from developing their own space navy, yet somehow they had constructed dozens of warships in underground facilities that Imperial satellites had never detected. Sir, our reconnaissance shows that the humans have turned their entire planet into a massive shipbuilding operation, Tae replied as he pulled up surveillance images. They are mining asteroids using captured Imperial equipment and building vessels in underground facilities that extend for kilometers beneath their major cities. The images showed something that violated everything Kyung understood about industrial capacity. The humans had somehow created a manufacturing system that could produce advanced spacecraft faster than Imperial shipyards that had been building vessels for thousands of years. The human ships were smaller and less heavily armed than Imperial warships, but they used tactics that the Empire had never encountered. Human pilots flew suicide missions, ramming their vessels into Imperial ships. With devastating effect, they used their planet's gravity well as a weapon, pulling Imperial vessels into destructive orbits. Most disturbing of all, the humans had weaponized space debris, turning the orbital junk around their planet into a defensive barrier. Imperial ships trying to approach Earth had to navigate through clouds of high-velocity metal fragments that could punch holes through even the strongest armor. Sir, we are receiving distress calls from our supply convoys, Tae reported. The humans have begun attacking our logistics ships between star systems. Somehow they have developed faster than light travel capabilities. This was impossible according to everything the Empire knew about technological development. Faster than light travel required sophisticated understanding of quantum mechanics, exotic matter manipulation, and dimensional physics. The humans should have needed centuries to develop such capabilities, but the evidence was undeniable. Human ships were appearing throughout Imperial space, attacking supply lines, liberating conquered worlds, and somehow spreading their resistance movement faster than Imperial forces could respond. The primitives had become apex predators, hunting Imperial forces across multiple star systems. Commander Day, who had survived the initial invasion, reported from his position in orbit around Earth. Sir, the human ground forces have begun offensive operations against our remaining bases. They are no longer content with defensive guerrilla warfare. They are actively pushing us off their planet. The tactical display showed human armies moving against Imperial strongholds with equipment and tactics that were beyond anything the aliens had expected. These humans had learned everything they could from captured Imperial technology and had improved on it using their own innovative approaches. Human artillery used hybrid plasma and kinetic systems that were more effective than pure energy weapons. Human aircraft combined Imperial anti-gravity technology with human aerodynamic design, creating fighters that could outmaneuver Imperial craft. Human ground vehicles were faster, more reliable, and better armored than their Imperial equivalents, but the most shocking development was that humans were taking their fight beyond their own solar system. Human expeditionary forces were attacking Imperial installations throughout the galaxy, using captured ships and weapons to strike at targets that should have been completely Safe, sir, we have received reports that human forces have liberated 4 Imperial colonies in the past week, Tay said with barely concealed panic. The local populations are joining human-led rebellions and using human tactics to fight against our occupation forces. Kyung realized that the Empire was facing something completely unprecedented. The humans were not just defending their own world, they were actively spreading their philosophy of resistance and freedom to other species every world. The humans liberated became a center for anti-imperial activity. The human approach to warfare was fundamentally different from anything the Empire had encountered. Imperial forces were designed to fight other organized militaries with clear command structures and predictable tactics, but humans fought like a virus spreading through healthy tissue, adapting to every defense and growing stronger with each victory. What made the humans truly dangerous was their ability to learn from every enemy they had studied Imperial tactics and developed countermeasures for every Imperial strategy. They had reverse-engineered Imperial technology and improved it using human innovation. They had even learned to think like Imperial commanders, while remaining fundamentally human in their approach, sir. The Emperor is requesting a full report on the situation, Tay said quietly. The Imperial capital was demanding explanations for how a primitive backwater world had somehow become the center of a galaxy-wide rebellion against Imperial authority. Kyung thought about how to explain that the species his forces had dismissed as primitive savages had somehow developed into the most dangerous enemy the Empire had ever faced. The humans had turned every disadvantage into an advantage and every defeat into a learning experience. The humans fight like they have nothing to lose because they believe they are fighting for something more important than their own lives, Kyung said slowly. They call it freedom, and they are willing to die for it, but more importantly, they are willing to kill for it. The communication system crackled with reports from Imperial commanders across the galaxy. Human forces were coordinating attacks on multiple fronts simultaneously, using tactics that seemed to anticipate Imperial responses. The primitives were fighting like they could read Imperial minds, sir. We have another problem, Tay reported. The humans have somehow made contact with other species that we conquered years ago. They are teaching our former enemies how to build weapons and organize resistance movements. The rebellion is spreading to worlds we thought were completely pacified. Kyung stared at the tactical display showing red markers indicating rebellion on dozens of Imperial worlds. The humans had done something that no species had ever accomplished before. They had turned the Empire's greatest strength, its vast size, into a weakness by showing every conquered people that resistance was possible. The ancient warning had been completely accurate. The humans refused to surrender when outnumbered. They learned from every defeat, and they grew stronger under pressure. But the warning had not mentioned the most dangerous human characteristic: their ability to inspire others to fight for freedom. Admiral Kyung realized that his invasion of Earth had not conquered a primitive world. It had awakened something that was spreading across the galaxy like fire. The Empire was no longer fighting a single species, it was fighting an idea that was more powerful than any weapon. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the 1,000-year history of the Empire. The great chamber that had witnessed the peaceful integration of 300 worlds now echoed with the sounds of panic and confusion. As reports flooded in from across the galaxy, Admiral Kyung stood before the assembled leaders of the Empire, his once proud uniform torn and stained with the marks of desperate battles. His ships had been driven from Earth orbit and his invasion force had been reduced to scattered survivors hiding in underground bunkers on a dozen different worlds. Behind him, holographic displays showed the impossible. Human ships were approaching the Imperial capital itself, moving through space with technology that combined alien science with human innovation. The primitives, who had barely reached their own moon 2 years ago, were now threatening the heart of the Empire-honored council members. Kyung began with a voice that shook with exhaustion and defeat. I stand before you to report that we have failed in our mission to integrate the human homeworld Earth into the Empire, but our failure is far greater than the loss of a single planet. We have awakened something that threatens our entire civilization. The council chamber fell silent as the displays showed human forces liberating Imperial colonies across the galaxy. The humans were not content with defending their own world, they had become liberators. spreading their philosophy of freedom and resistance. To every species the Empire had conquered, Council leader Nari studied the reports with growing amazement. In less than 2 years, humans had gone from primitive planet-bound creatures to a galactic force that was rewriting the rules of warfare technology. And civilization itself, they had formed alliances with dozens of species and were coordinating resistance movements on hundreds of worlds. How is this possible? Nari demanded. The humans had no space travel capability when we first encountered them. Our intelligence reports showed they were centuries away from developing faster than light technology, yet now they command fleets that rival our own Kyung. Activated another display showing human innovations that defied Imperial science. The humans had not just copied Imperial technology, they had improved it, combined it with their own designs, and created hybrid systems that were often superior to the originals. We underestimated their adaptability, Hyung explained. When we attacked them, we expected them to surrender like every other primitive species. Instead, they studied our weapons, learned our tactics, and turned our own technology against us. Every battle taught them something new, and they shared that knowledge across their entire species. The council members looked at each other with growing fear. They had spent centuries building the empire through superior technology and overwhelming force. The idea that a primitive species could match and even surpass Imperial capabilities seemed impossible. Council member Bio reviewed intelligence reports about human psychology and culture. What do they want from us? He asked. Are they planning to conquer the Empire and rule the galaxy themselves? Before Kyung could answer, the chamber doors opened and figures in strange armor walked into the room. The Imperial guards reached for their weapons, but stopped when they realized these were humans who had somehow penetrated the most secure facility in the galaxy. The lead figure removed her helmet, revealing a human female with dark hair and calm eyes. Her name was Hien. She spoke perfect Imperial language as she addressed the terrified council members. She carried no visible weapons, but her presence filled the chamber with quiet authority. Honored council members, Hai said with a slight smile, we appreciate your invitation to speak before this assembly, though we admit we did not wait for formal permission to attend this meeting. How did you get past our security systems? Nari demanded. The Imperial capital was protected by energy barriers, defense satellites, and the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. Hai gestured to her companions, who were removing their helmets to reveal humans of different ages and backgrounds. Your security systems are very impressive, she replied, but they were designed to stop Imperial technology. We use different approaches to solving problems. The council realized with horror that humans had somehow traveled across the galaxy, penetrated their defenses, and entered their most secure facility without triggering a single alarm. The primitives had turned into something far more dangerous than any military force. What do you want from us? Bo asked again, his voice shaking with barely controlled fear. Hai looked around the chamber with eyes that seemed to see everything. We want what we have always wanted, she said simply, to live our lives in peace and freedom. But since you would not allow us to do that, we had to teach you what happens when you threaten humanity. She gestured to the holographic displays, showing human ships and liberated worlds. We are not conquerors like you. We do not believe that one species has the right to rule over others. We believe that every intelligent being deserves the right to choose their own destiny. The truth hit the council members like a physical blow. The humans were not trying to replace the Empire with their own version of galactic domination. They were trying to destroy the very concept of Empire itself. They were teaching every species in the galaxy that freedom was possible. Admiral Kyung stepped forward with resignation in his voice. We should have listened to the ancient warning, he admitted. The message spoke of beings who refused to surrender, who grew stronger when challenged, and who could not be conquered through force. Hai nodded as she accessed the ancient data crystal that had been ignored for so long. The warning was accurate in every detail, she said. The ancients met humans long ago during one of our early space exploration periods. They learned what you have learned, that humanity cannot be conquered, only awakened. Council leader Nari looked at the reports showing rebellions spreading across the galaxy. What will happen to the Empire? She asked. Hai smiled with the confidence of someone who had already won. The Empire will become what it should have been from the beginning, she replied. A voluntary association of free species working together for mutual benefit rather than a system of domination and control, the humans had accomplished something that seemed impossible. They had turned certain defeat into inevitable victory, not through superior weapons or larger armies, but through superior ideas. They had shown the galaxy that freedom was more powerful than tyranny and that cooperation was stronger than domination. As Hai and her companions left the council chamber, the Imperial leaders realized that their galaxy would never be the same. The ancient warning had been fulfilled completely. The Empire had encountered humanity and learned too late that some species cannot be conquered, they can only inspire others to be free. The age of the Empire was ending and the age of freedom was beginning, and it had all started when Admiral Kyung ignored an ancient warning about a small blue planet in an unexplored arm of the galaxy.